She wasn't supposed to be alone that evening. A pregnant woman, one hand on her belly, the other holding the leash of the only guardian her faraway husband left behind, a loyal German shepherd named Hunter. Cedar Hill was quiet, until a shadow shifted behind the supermarket lot. 3 men stepped out, smirking, whispering, getting closer. Hunter sensed it first, the danger, the scent, the evil behind their grin. And when the first metal pipe swung, everything changed. What those men didn't know, what would soon turn this peaceful town upside down, was simple. Her husband wasn't just any man. He was a Navy SEAL who moved like silence itself. And tonight, he was coming home. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, leave a like to honor loyal dogs like Hunter, and hit subscribe for more stories where courage walks quietly until it's needed most. Autumn light drifted softly over Cedar Hill, Colorado, as a cool breeze slid between the houses and over the old baseball field behind them. The town looked like a postcard, maple trees turning gold and rust, porches lined with pumpkins, chimneys just beginning to breathe out thin threads of smoke. But for Emma Walker, the calm felt fragile, like glass that might crack if anyone breathed too hard. Emma was 30, 7 months pregnant, with the kind of slim, athletic frame that pregnancy had only softened instead of hiding. Her long brown hair, once wild and free down her back, was now always tied into a practical low ponytail at the nape of her neck so it wouldn't fall into her face when she bent to pick something up or steady her breathing. Her skin had a gentle warmth to it, but there were faint shadows under her eyes, the kind that came from too many sleepless nights, and one question that never stopped humming in the back of her mind. Is he still safe out there? She walked carefully along the cracked sidewalk that led to the field, one hand instinctively pressed against the small of her back, the other wrapped around a worn leather leash. On the other end of that leash moved Hunter. Hunter was a 4-year-old German shepherd with a powerful, balanced build and a classic black and tan coat that caught the sunlight in a burnished glow. His ears stood high and alert, his brown eyes scanning constantly, always a half second ahead of everything else. There was an intelligence in his gaze that made strangers pause and second-guess any sudden movement near Emma. Hunter had once trained as a K-9, and though an old injury had ended his service, the training had never really left him. To Emma, Hunter was more than a dog. He was the steady heartbeat beside her when the world felt too quiet, the weight at her feet when the bed felt too big, the presence that filled the space Jack used to occupy. As they reached the edge of the old baseball field, Emma paused to catch her breath. The baby shifted inside her, a firm push against her ribs, and she winced, exhaling slowly. Anxiety and love tangled together in her chest. She rubbed her belly gently. "Easy, little one," she murmured, half to the baby, half to herself. "We're okay. We're still okay." She wasn't afraid of the town. Cedar Hill was small, steady, predictable. Neighbors who knew each other's first names and the dogs they walked, the kids they raised, the losses they carried. What she feared was the silence on the other end of the world, the silence between missions, the silence between emails. Jack Walker filled that silence in her mind. In her memory, he stood tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders, built from years of training, skin browned by sun and salt and sand. His short black hair, always cut to regulation, contrasted with a light stubble that darkened his strong jaw when he was home on leave, long enough to forget to shave. His eyes, a sharp steel blue, could be both gentle and terrifying, depending on who was standing in front of him. To their neighbors, he was the polite, quiet guy who grills well. To his team, he was something else entirely, a Navy SEAL who went where other people refused to go. To Emma, he was simply the man who kissed her forehead before leaving and promised, "I'll come back. I always come back." But now, with months gone and communication thin as mist, those words didn't quiet the fear like they used to. Hunter shifted, ears twitching, pulling her back to the present. "Go on," she said softly, unclipping the leash. Hunter bounded forward, but even his enthusiasm had discipline. He didn't bolt far, just enough to stretch his legs, looping tight circles around her and the rusty chain-link fence. Emma shuffled to the weathered bleachers and eased herself down, one step at a time. Her joints complained, but she had grown used to that. Her body no longer strictly her own, carrying a second heart that hadn't yet seen the world. She watched Hunter run, a small smile tugging at her lips. Out here, for a few brief minutes every afternoon, she could pretend everything was simple. Just her, the dog, and the baby, who kicked hardest at sunset. The sound of a screen door creaking open broke the quiet. Emma glanced over her shoulder to see Ruth Harris shuffling down her front steps. Ruth was in her late 60s, with soft, pale skin, lined by years of laughter and grief. Short silver hair curled neatly around her face, and a pair of glasses perched on the end of her nose. She wore a faded pink sweater, old jeans, and slippers that had seen better days, but her posture still carried a kind of stubborn dignity. She waved one hand, the other gripping a chipped mug of tea. "You two out on patrol again?" Ruth called, voice warm and teasing. Emma laughed, raising a hand in return. "He takes it more seriously than I do." Ruth's eyes softened as she looked at the round curve of Emma's belly and the dog looping back toward her. "Chathi tran ne, tin Hunter hon butki he tong and nin now," she said with a chuckle, her accent wrapping around the words. "That dog's better than a dozen cameras." "I know," Emma replied. "I'd lose my mind without him." What she didn't say was that some days, when the night stretched long and the fear crept in, Hunter was the only reason she didn't dissolve into tears on the kitchen floor. Ruth must have sensed something of that because her expression gentled. "Jack will be fine," the older woman said firmly. "That man has the kind of stubborn bones that don't break easy." Emma wanted to believe that. She nodded as if she did, but deep down, doubt flickered. War didn't care how stubborn a man was. War took who it wanted. Hunter trotted back to her side, tongue lolling slightly, chest rising and falling steadily. Emma scratched his neck, feeling the solid warmth under her fingers. "See?" she whispered. "Your dad's got backup." The word dad caught in her throat. It felt too hopeful. As the sun dipped lower, Emma decided to head home. She clipped the leash back onto Hunter's harness and made her way toward the sidewalk that ran past the small convenience store on the corner. The air cooled quickly once the sun shifted, autumn's bite creeping into the edges of the day. She adjusted her grip on the leash and the strap of her loose gray cardigan, trying not to think about the distance between Cedar Hill and whatever nameless place Jack stood in now. As she approached the store, Hunter slowed. The sudden change in his gait sent a warning shiver up her spine. His head lifted, ears locking forward, his body shifting subtly so that he was a half step closer to her belly. Emma followed his gaze. At first, she didn't see anything unusual. The gray pickup truck parked haphazardly near the curb could have belonged to any contractor or delivery driver, but then she noticed the three men sitting on its tailgate. The one in the middle drew her eye first. Mason Briggs was in his late 20s, but already bore the weathered look of someone who had spent too many nights on the wrong side of bad decisions. His frame was lean but hard, muscles visible under a tight black t-shirt despite the chill. Intricate tattoos crawled up his arms and snaked along his neck, dark ink against sun-worn skin. His hair was cropped into a short, dark buzz cut, and his gray eyes were sharp, restless, scanning everything with the coiled suspicion of a street predator. A half smirk tugged at his mouth, the kind that never reached his eyes. Beside him sat two younger men, Tyler and Ross, faces she didn't recognize, clothes as colorless as the truck. Their hoodies were pulled up despite the mild weather, jeans loose, boots scuffed. Emma couldn't describe exactly what felt off about them. She just knew that something in her body recoiled. Hunter knew it too. A low growl began in his chest, almost a vibration against the leash. He moved in front of her instinctively, positioning his body between her and the three men, tail down but stiff, muscles tensed. Emma's pulse kicked up. She tightened her grip on the leash. "Easy," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Mason's gaze lifted and locked onto her. For a moment, silence stretched. His eyes flicked from her face to her belly, then to Hunter, calculating. The smirk on his lips twisted. He straightened a bit on the tailgate. "Coke and Jikong?" he asked in accented English, dragging the words out lazily, his tone oiled with boredom and something darker underneath. Emma swallowed, fighting the urge to turn around and run. "No," she answered, voice steady but quiet. "Just passing through." She pulled the leash closer. Hunter stepped forward, blocking more of her body, the line of his back rigid. His growl deepened, just enough for Mason and his friends to hear. Mason's eyes narrowed. For a second, something cold slid behind them, like a curtain shifting to reveal the truth underneath. Then he shrugged, looking away as if she no longer mattered. But Emma felt it. The subtle change in the air, the sharp edge under his fake indifference. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She forced herself to keep walking, even as every instinct screamed to get off the street. Hunter didn't take his eyes off the men until they were several houses away. Only then did his posture soften slightly, though Emma could still feel the tension running through the leash like a wire. She exhaled shakily. "Good boy," she whispered. "You felt something too, didn't you?" Hunter brushed against her leg, protective as ever. She didn't know it yet, but from that brief moment on the sidewalk, the stare, the growl, the silent calculation in a stranger's eyes, the quiet peace of Cedar Hill had already begun to crack. The next afternoon settled over Cedar Hill with a muted stillness, the kind that made even the air feel cautious. The supermarket parking lot behind Redwood Market stretched wide and almost empty, dust swirling in thin spirals whenever the cold wind scraped across the asphalt. Emma Walker walked slowly, her steps measured, her breath steady but shallow beneath the weight of her 7-month belly. Her long brown hair, tied in the same low ponytail as the day before, fluttered when the wind tugged at it. Hunter stayed glued to her side, the 4-year-old German shepherd brushing his black and tan fur lightly against her leg now and then, as if reminding her that she wasn't alone. The thought calmed her, until she turned the corner. The same gray truck she had seen yesterday was there again, but this time the air around it felt sharper. 3 men hovered near the open tailgate, movements tense, voices low. Emma stopped mid-step. Hunter stopped with her. Mason Briggs was impossible to miss. At 28, he had the wiry muscle of someone who'd lived off adrenaline instead of discipline. His skin bore the roughness of too much sun and too little sleep, and his short, buzz-cut hair made the faded tattoos around his neck stand out like dark warnings. Today, his expression was meaner, jaw tight, shoulders stiff, eyes restless in a way that suggested guilt or paranoia. Beside him, Tyler moved nervously, a man in his early 20s with pale, almost sickly skin and greasy blonde hair tied back in a sloppy knot. His blue eyes darted everywhere, twitching like he was expecting an ambush at any second. His gray hoodie hung too big on his thin frame, sleeves frayed. Ross stood closest to the truck. He was the opposite of Tyler, a heavy-set man with a thick, dark beard, hair unkempt, shoulders broad and angled, like someone used to solving problems with brute force. His red and black flannel shirt strained over his stomach whenever he bent down. Both men looked fatigued, their faces drawn, as if whatever business they were involved in had been wearing them down for years. Emma felt her throat tighten. She didn't want to stare, didn't want to look curious, but the tension in her chest made her steps slow. Was she imagining the danger? Was it just the anxiety of pregnancy mixing with the fear of being alone while Jack was overseas? She tried to convince herself to keep walking. Then Mason lifted his head. His gray eyes locked on her belly first, round, obvious, vulnerable, then on the leash in her hand, and then, dangerously, on Hunter. His expression changed instantly. Suspicion sharpened into hostility. "Hey! Kodang kwe fima!" he barked, stepping forward with a violent jolt of movement. The suddenness of it made Emma stumble backward, her hand instinctively flying to cradle her stomach. "No, I'm just walking," she stammered, voice cracking. Her fear wasn't for herself. It was for the child she carried. Hunter sensed it before she even finished speaking. The German shepherd surged forward, planting himself directly between Emma and Mason, his body transforming from gentle companion to hardened guardian in seconds. His ears shot upward, tail stiff, and the deep, resonant bark he released echoed off the metal dumpster behind them like a warning siren. Tyler flinched violently. Ross's eyes widened, and then panic shattered whatever thin control they had left. "Dannadi! Nyan!" Ross roared, voice gravelly and cracking with fear. Tyler grabbed the nearest thing, a rusted metal rod leaning against the truck. His pale hands shook so badly that the rod rattled when he lifted it. His face turned white, lips trembling. He wasn't brave. He wasn't violent by nature. He was scared, and scared men make reckless moves. "Stop, stop," Emma cried, reaching out as if the gesture itself could halt the chaos. But Tyler had already swung. Hunter lunged at the same time, not at the men, not to attack, but to shield Emma's stomach. The metal rod connected with Hunter's ribs with a sickening, heavy crack. The sound punched the air out of Emma's lungs. "Hunter!" she screamed, voice breaking into raw panic. The German shepherd staggered, but didn't fall. Instead, he forced himself upright, placing his trembling body between Emma and the three men again, teeth bared, breaths ragged. Pain radiated through his side, but his instincts overrode it. Protect first, endure later. Emma dropped to her knees beside him, arms thrown around his neck, as if her embrace alone could shield him from further harm. Tears streamed hot down her cheeks as she lowered her body protectively over her belly. "Please, please don't hurt him," she cried, voice quivering with terror. Mason's expression cracked with fear. The blow had been louder than expected, too loud. Someone had surely heard. "We gotta go," he snapped. And just like that, the three men scrambled into the gray truck, engines revving violently before they peeled out of the parking lot, tires screeching. Their silhouettes vanished around the corner. The world fell silent for a heartbeat. Only Emma's uneven sobs and Hunter's painful whimpers filled the air. "Help! Someone, please!" a voice yelled in the distance. Footsteps approached rapidly. A middle-aged man in a green jacket sprinted toward Emma. A woman behind him pulled out her phone and dialed frantically. "I'm calling the police," she shouted. Emma didn't lift her head. Her hands clung desperately to Hunter's fur. "Please, save him," she whispered. "My husband's not here. I can't lose him, too." Her voice cracked into nothing. She didn't see the terrified looks shared by the bystanders. She didn't see the flashing red lights speeding toward the scene minutes later, and she didn't see how far her cries traveled that day, farther than she could ever imagine, far enough to reach the one man who could not bear to hear her pain. The call reached Jack Walker in the middle of a dust-colored dusk over a temporary desert outpost, a place so far from Cedar Hill that it barely felt like the same world. The wind outside the metal barracks carried sand like a warning, rattling the thin walls. Jack was hunched over a small desk, cleaning and reassembling a rifle with the same cold precision he used for everything in the field. His black hair, cropped tight to regulation but slightly overgrown after weeks without proper rest, was matted with sweat. Stubble darkened his sharp jawline. His steel blue eyes didn't blink often. They'd learned not to. He looked like a man carved from quiet storms and unfinished wars. Then his satellite phone buzzed, one short vibration that sliced through the room like a blade. Jack answered it without hesitation, expecting another briefing, maybe an extraction order. Instead, he froze. The voice on the other end trembled, the kind of tremor no soldier ignored. "Your wife was attacked." 3 words, nothing more. Yet they crashed into him harder than any explosion he had ever survived. He didn't ask who. He didn't ask how. He didn't ask if she was alive. He stood, setting the half-assembled rifle down carefully as if any abrupt movement might break the world open, and said only 4 words, his voice low and iron steady. "Book me a flight, now." No permission request, no protocol, no second thoughts. A Navy SEAL did not abandon missions, but a husband did not abandon his wife. 20 hours later, after 3 connecting flights and 1 sleepless layover, Jack stepped out of a taxi in front of Cedar Hill Veterinary Clinic. The autumn air hit him with brutal contrast, crisp, cold, clean, nothing like the suffocating heat he had just come from. In the clinic's glass door, he saw his reflection, a tall figure in a black jacket thrown hastily over a faded tactical shirt, broad shoulders stiff with tension, eyes dark and unreadable. His face looked older than it had weeks ago. Exhaustion clawed at the edges, and the stubble had grown into a rough shadow framing his square jaw. He pushed the door open. Antiseptic air rushed out to meet him. He scanned the room once, swift and surgical, until his gaze landed on her. Emma sat on a chair beside a padded table, her long brown hair loose, strands sticking to her tear-dampened cheeks. Her maternity dress, light gray with soft pleats, clung awkwardly to her swollen belly as she leaned forward, one hand resting protectively over it. Her pale skin looked washed out under the fluorescent lights, but her eyes were red and trembling, and Hunter lay on the table beside her. The 4-year-old German shepherd was bandaged along the ribs, his black and tan fur shaved in places for treatment. One paw was extended toward Emma's lap, as if he had tried to comfort her even while in pain. His breathing was steady but strained. Jack's chest tightened painfully. Hunter wasn't just a dog. He was the partner Jack had left behind to guard the two lives that mattered most. Emma lifted her head the moment Jack stepped inside. Their eyes met, and something inside her broke. "Jack." Her voice was a small, shattered whisper. He crossed the room in 3 long strides. The closer he got, the more he saw. The faint red marks where Emma had clutched Hunter. The way her shoulders shook. The way she kept blinking, as if trying to stay strong for the baby. Jack reached her and gently touched her hand. That was all it took for her to crumble. She fell against him, sobs muffled into his chest. Jack wrapped one strong arm around her shoulders, supporting all of her weight as if protecting her from gravity itself. His other hand rested lightly on her back, steady, repeating silent affirmations he couldn't bring himself to speak aloud. When Emma finally pulled away, wiping her tears with trembling fingers, she whispered, I thought I was going to lose him, and you weren't here." Jack's stomach twisted. He looked at Hunter. The dog's brown eyes flicked open, meeting his. Even injured, they were alert, loyal, proud. Then Jack saw it. The faint flinch of pain when the dog shifted. The bandage stained, slightly pink. Something cold and heavy coiled inside him. Not rage, not yet. Something sharper, something older. He stepped closer to the table and placed a hand gently on Hunter's head. "Good boy," Jack murmured, voice softer than he ever used on the battlefield. "You protected them." Hunter's tail tapped the table once, weak but determined. Then Jack straightened. His shoulders rolled back. His jaw clenched. His eyes, those steel blue eyes, went from soft to lethal in an instant. No more tears, no more tremors. A soldier had returned. A warrior had been awakened. He turned and walked outside into the cold evening air. The wind scraped leaves across the parking lot, but Jack didn't feel the chill. He stared into the empty street, breath steady, expression carved from stone. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, controlled, merciless. "Whoever did this, I'll find them." The tone carried no threat. It was a vow. But Jack had yet to learn that the men he would hunt were not small-time thugs. They were shadows reaching farther than he imagined, and he was about to step into a war no one in Cedar Hill knew existed. Night settled over Cedar Hill like a heavy curtain, muting colors and softening the edges of rooftops and fences. But for Jack Walker, the darkness sharpened everything. It brought back the instincts he'd spent years refining: silence, precision, and the ability to see what others overlooked. After leaving Emma at home, her cheeks still pale, her hands trembling slightly as she stroked Hunter's fur, Jack stepped out into the cold evening with a focus that bordered on dangerous. His breath fogged in short bursts. His boots hit the pavement soundlessly. He moved like someone who'd returned to a familiar battlefield. Cedar Hill had never felt threatening before, but now it felt small, fragile, exposed. He started at the neighborhood street corner and walked slowly, scanning each porch camera, each shadow, each figure passing under the street lamp. When he reached the convenience store where Emma first saw Mason Briggs, he paused. The place looked normal. A flickering neon sign, a rack of newspapers inside the door, a teenager stocking shelves. But Jack felt something off. Not in the store, but in the air. The kind of tension that lingers after violence has brushed past. A middle-aged man in a puffy blue jacket stepped out with a soda in hand. He froze when he saw Jack. Jack still wearing the black tactical jacket he hadn't taken off since he landed, steel blue eyes unblinking. "Evening," Jack said, voice calm. The man swallowed, then nodded. "You seen anything unusual the last couple days?" Jack asked. "Gray truck. 3 men, loud, aggressive." The man blinked, searching his memory. Yeah, actually. That truck was there yesterday. Guys gave me a bad feeling." He pointed toward the back alley. "Heard something drop, like metal." Jack's jaw tightened. "Thank you," he said quietly, and continued walking. The man didn't dare ask why. At the back of the store, Jack stopped. The alley smelled faintly of damp cardboard and spilled soda, but beneath that lingered something sharper. A chemical scent. Chemical, artificial, faint but unmistakable. He crouched, running his hand across the ground. His fingers brushed a thin smear of white dust. He brought it close to his nose, inhaling carefully. Not flour, not chalk, nothing harmless. Synthetic stimulant residue. A kind he'd smelled before during operations he still wasn't allowed to talk about. His stomach dropped in a cold, exacting way. "So that's what you were moving," he murmured, rising. He continued toward the supermarket parking lot, retracing Emma's steps in his mind. At the far end of the lot, he found them. Tire marks. 2 sets. One from standard factory tires, the other with a track pattern he recognized instantly. Custom off-road tread, used by smugglers to drive through rough terrain without leaving clear impressions. Jack knelt, placing his palm over the indentations. They were fresh, less than 24 hours old. His breathing slowed. His senses sharpened, funneling into one singular truth. Emma didn't just stumble into the wrong place at the wrong time. She'd crossed paths with something organized, something dangerous, something that had been hiding in Cedar Hill's quiet edges. Standing, Jack followed the trail of the leaked chemical scent. It led him to the exact spot Emma had described, right where Hunter had been struck. A faint stain on the asphalt marked where Hunter had landed after the blow. Jack stared at it, feeling a surge of emotion so intense it almost broke the mask he wore. He closed his eyes. Hunter had stood between his pregnant wife and a metal pipe, his dog, his partner, and someone had dared to hurt him. When Jack opened his eyes, all the softness was gone. A shadow of violence hung over them now. He walked back home in near silence, but inside the house the air felt different, heavy, charged. Hunter lay on a blanket beside the couch, bandaged and groggy, but awake. His black and tan coat rose and fell with each slow breath. Emma sat beside him, one hand on her belly, the other stroking Hunter's neck with gentle, trembling movements. She looked up as Jack entered. Did you find anything?" she asked softly. Jack crouched beside her. "Yes," she swallowed. "And the truck wasn't local," he said. "It belongs to a federal-level drug ring. People who don't leave witnesses behind." The words hit her like a tremor. She pressed a hand harder against her belly as if shielding the baby from the truth. "So, I could have been... They weren't after you." Jack's voice remained steady, but his jaw clenched. "They were moving product. You just happened to be there." Emma's lips trembled. "And Hunter?" Jack looked at the dog. Hunter's eyes, dark, loyal, pain-clouded, blinked back. "He recognized the scent," Jack said. "Synthetic compounds used in meth distribution. Canines are trained to pick it up even in trace amounts." Emma's breath caught. "So he knew?" "He knew," Jack repeated quietly. "And he saved you. And our child." A tear slipped down her cheek. She leaned closer to Hunter, kissing the top of his head. Jack stood again, but something had changed in him, his posture more rigid, his expression colder. "Emma," he said, "they'll come back." She looked at him, fear widening her eyes. "Why?" "Because you saw their faces," he answered, "and Hunter smelled their product." The room went painfully quiet. Emma's hands tightened protectively around her belly. Hunter shifted, letting out a low, warning rumble at the door, even in his injured state. Jack moved to the window, scanning the street. Shadows stretched across the pavement. Somewhere out there, danger waited. "You're their witness," Jack said softly, deadly calm. "And I'm the only thing between them and the woman I love." And in that moment, the truth rose from the dark like a blade, through fog, sharp, inevitable, and ready to draw blue. Night settled over Cedar Hill like a heavy curtain, muting colors and softening the edges of rooftops and fences. But for Jack Walker, the darkness sharpened everything. It brought back the instincts he'd spent years refining: silence, precision, and the ability to see what others overlooked. After leaving Emma at home, her cheeks still pale, her hands trembling slightly as she stroked Hunter's fur, Jack stepped out into the cold evening with a focus that bordered on dangerous. His breath fogged in short bursts. His boots hit the pavement soundlessly. He moved like someone who'd returned to a familiar battlefield. Cedar Hill had never felt threatening before, but now it felt small, fragile, exposed. He started at the neighborhood street corner and walked slowly, scanning each porch camera, each shadow, each figure passing under the street lamp. When he reached the convenience store where Emma first saw Mason Briggs, he paused. The place looked normal. A flickering neon sign, a rack of newspapers inside the door, a teenager stocking shelves, but Jack felt something off. Not in the store, but in the air. The kind of tension that lingers after violence has brushed past. A middle-aged man in a puffy blue jacket stepped out with a soda in hand. He froze when he saw Jack. Jack still wearing the black tactical jacket he hadn't taken off since he landed, steel blue eyes unblinking. "Evening," Jack said, voice calm. The man swallowed, then nodded. "You seen anything unusual the last couple days?" Jack asked. "Gray truck, 3 men, loud, aggressive." The man blinked, searching his memory. Yeah, actually. That truck was there yesterday. Guys gave me a bad feeling." He pointed toward the back alley. "Heard something drop, like metal." Jack's jaw tightened. "Thank you," he said quietly, and continued walking. The man didn't dare ask why. At the back of the store, Jack stopped. The alley smelled faintly of damp cardboard and spilled soda, but beneath that lingered something sharper. A chemical scent. Chemical. Artificial. Faint, but unmistakable. He crouched, running his hand across the ground. His fingers brushed a thin smear of white dust. He brought it close to his nose, inhaling carefully. Not flour, not chalk, nothing harmless. Synthetic stimulant residue. A kind he'd smelled before during operations he still wasn't allowed to talk about. His stomach dropped in a cold, exacting way. "So that's what you were moving," he murmured, rising. He continued toward the supermarket parking lot, retracing Emma's steps in his mind. At the far end of the lot, he found them, tire marks. 2 sets, one from standard factory tires, the other with a track pattern he recognized instantly, custom off-road tread, used by smugglers to drive through rough terrain without leaving clear impressions. Jack knelt, placing his palm over the indentations. They were fresh, less than 24 hours old. His breathing slowed, his senses sharpened, funneling into one singular truth. Emma didn't just stumble into the wrong place at the wrong time. She'd crossed paths with something organized, something dangerous, something that had been hiding in Cedar Hill's quiet edges. Standing, Jack followed the trail of the leaked chemical scent. It led him to the exact spot Emma had described, right where Hunter had been struck. A faint stain on the asphalt marked where Hunter had landed after the blow. Jack stared at it, feeling a surge of emotion so intense it almost broke the mask he wore. He closed his eyes. Hunter had stood between his pregnant wife and a metal pipe. His dog, his partner, and someone had dared to hurt him. When Jack opened his eyes, all the softness was gone. A shadow of violence hung over them now. He walked back home in near silence, but inside the house the air felt different. Heavy. Charged. Hunter lay on a blanket beside the couch, bandaged and groggy, but awake. His black and tan coat rose and fell with each slow breath. Emma sat beside him, one hand on her belly, the other stroking Hunter's neck with gentle, trembling movements. She looked up as Jack entered. Did you find anything?" she asked softly. Jack crouched beside her. "Yes." She swallowed. "And—" "The truck wasn't local," he said. "It belongs to a federal-level drug ring. People who don't leave witnesses behind." The words hit her like a tremor. She pressed a hand harder against her belly as if shielding the baby from the truth. "So, I could have been—" "They weren't after you." Jack's voice remained steady, but his jaw clenched. "They were moving product. You just happened to be there." Emma's lips trembled. "And Hunter?" Jack looked at the dog. Hunter's eyes, dark, loyal, pain-clouded, blinked back. "He recognized the scent," Jack said. "Synthetic compounds used in meth distribution. Canines are trained to pick it up even in trace amounts." Emma's breath caught. "So he knew?" "He knew," Jack repeated quietly. "And he saved you. And our child." A tear slipped down her cheek. She leaned closer to Hunter, kissing the top of his head. Jack stood again, but something had changed in him, his posture more rigid, his expression colder. "Emma," he said, "they'll come back." She looked at him, fear widening her eyes. "Why?" "Because you saw their faces," he answered, "and Hunter smelled their product." The room went painfully quiet. Emma's hands tightened protectively around her belly. Hunter shifted, letting out a low, warning rumble at the door, even in his injured state. Jack moved to the window, scanning the street. Shadows stretched across the pavement. Somewhere out there, danger waited. "You're their witness," Jack said softly, deadly calm. "And I'm the only thing between them and the woman I love." And that moment, the truth rose from the dark like a blade through fog, sharp, inevitable, and ready to draw blue. Night pressed heavily against the Walker home, the kind of silence that felt stretched too thin, ready to tear at the slightest disturbance. Emma lay in bed, her hands resting protectively over her swollen stomach, breath shallow as she fought to calm her racing thoughts. Hunter lay beside the doorway, bandaged but alert, his black and tan fur rising and falling sharply with each guarded breath. Jack sat in the living room chair, motionless, listening, his eyes open, though the room was dark. Something in him refused to rest. Then it came, a sound most people wouldn't register, a soft shift of weight on gravel, a boot scraping lightly against wood, footsteps. Jack's eyes snapped toward the back door. In an instant, every instinct he had, honed across deserts, jungles, and battlefields, surged awake. The Navy SEAL inside him, the part of him that never slept, stood up before the man could even think. Emma sensed it too. She pushed herself upright, heart pounding, skin pale in the moonlight. Hunter rose with a painful grunt, positioning himself between Emma and the closed bedroom door, ears pinned back, teeth bared, though he could barely stand. Outside, Mason Briggs crept forward, the weak porchlight carving harsh shadows across his gaunt face. His short, buzz-cut hair stood in uneven spikes, as though he had run his hands through it dozens of times in panic. Behind him, Tyler and Ross followed close. Tyler with shaking hands and eyes too wide, Ross with his large frame hunched, sweat glistening in his beard. This wasn't bravado. This was desperation. The kind that made men do stupid, irreversible things. Inside, Jack positioned himself beside the doorframe, blending into darkness like a second shadow. His jaw tightened. His heart rate didn't rise. His breathing didn't change. He became what he had been trained to be, a ghost. The back door creaked. Mason slowly pushed it open, the metal pipe still in his hand. Fear, guilt, and adrenaline carved sharp lines across his face. He whispered to Ross, "Quick, grab the woman, no noise." But the house answered before Ross could move. A blur cut through the shadows. A hand hooked Tyler's wrist, twisting the bone until it snapped with a muted crack. Tyler screamed, but the sound died in his throat when Jack's arm locked around his neck and drove him silently to the floor, unconscious before he even knew what hit him. Ross turned too late. Jack swept low and fast, one leg behind Ross's knees, one palm smashing into the man's shoulder. The big man went down face first, beard scraping the hardwood, breath knocked out of his lungs. Jack pinned him effortlessly with one knee between the shoulder blades. Mason stared, stunned. He didn't even see Jack move. 1 second, the man was in the shadows. The next, Tyler and Ross were on the floor. Jack stepped toward him slowly. The dim moonlight from the window carved the edges of his face into something both human and terrifying. His black jacket clung to his tall, muscular frame, the stubble on his jaw shadowing his expression into something unreadable, something cold. Mason lifted the metal pipe with trembling hands. Jack didn't flinch. "You don't want to do that," he said, voice low, controlled. His steel blue eyes locked onto Mason's, and for the first time, Mason saw the truth. Jack wasn't angry. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't even breathing hard. He was calculating, and that was worse. Mason swung anyway, panic overriding reason. Jack stepped aside before the pipe completed half its arc. He seized Mason's wrist, twisted, and disarmed him with surgical precision. In seconds, Mason was on the floor, arm locked behind his back, face pinned to the cold tile. No broken bones, no blood, no unnecessary brutality, just control. Just enough pain to make surrender the only option. By the time police sirens wailed down the street, Mason was already sobbing, words spilling from him in frantic fragments. "I thought she was filming. I panicked. I didn't know the dog was trained. Please, please." Jack didn't respond. He simply held Mason in place, expression unreadable. When the police led the three men away in cuffs, Mason stole one last glance at Jack. Fear, shame, understanding. Jack spoke only once, leaning slightly toward him, his voice the whisper of a winter blade. She didn't need a camera. She had a loyal friend. And that friend, I protect with everything I am. Mason lowered his head. He said nothing more. Weeks passed. Hunter slowly regained his strength, his ribs healing beneath Emma's gentle care. Emma gave birth earlier than expected, but mother and child were healthy, a small miracle wrapped in tiny blankets and soft cries. Jack held his newborn daughter, eyes wide, fingers curling around his thumb, and for the first time since returning home, the hardness in his chest loosened. Cedar Hill placed a wooden plaque near the old field where Emma used to walk. Hunter, the guardian of Cedar Hill. And peace returned, not because danger vanished, but because love, quiet, fierce, unbreakable, had proven stronger. A woman brave enough to face fear, a Navy SEAL willing to face death, and a dog whose heart beat like an angel's. In the quiet corners of life, miracles rarely arrive with thunder. Sometimes they come on four legs, sometimes in the courage of a mother, and sometimes in the steady hands of a husband who refuses to let darkness win. What happened in Cedar Hill was not just luck. It was protection. It was grace, and maybe, just maybe, it was God placing his hand over a family that still believed in love, loyalty, and second chances. As we walk through our own storms, fear, loneliness, burdens we never speak of, may we remember this. No night is too dark for God to send light. No danger is too great for him to shield us. And no heart is ever left undefended when faith still breathes within it. If this story touched you, share it so someone else may feel a little less alone today. Leave a comment to tell us where you're watching from. And subscribe for more stories where hope survives, courage rises, and God's quiet miracles still walk among us. May the Lord bless you, protect your home, and place his angels at your door tonight.